Greetings! Welcome to Eminent Reflection. If people paid enough attention, they could learn from Bernie Sanders without him having to say a word how to win at electing him as our president. I hope you're ready to pay attention and to share this with other people who are also ready to pay attention. Here it comes. We progressives are constantly told that we can't win. Believing that lie is precisely what most often prevents us from winning. And those perpetuating the lie are either doing it because they've already been convinced it's true, or because they want us to give up so that it becomes true. In other words, it only becomes true if we collectively make it true. This means that enough of us refusing to participate in making it true can prevent it from actually becoming true in the first place. Even if we're being told that it has already been true for some time now. So how do you know when it has actually become true that we can't win? When there is not one single person left trying and we've actually lost. Notice I did say not one single person left trying. Even after we've lost, there is still a chance that people fighting such results can get them overturned. So if anyone is still trying, it's not accurate to say that we cannot win. That said, I will not give up. Which is why I campaigned not just in 2015, but also through 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019 for the election of Bernie Sanders as President of the United States. And why I will still be campaigning for the election of Bernie Sanders as our president at least through the end of 2020, and I most likely will continue to campaign for Bernie's election or re-election as president through 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. That's persistence. Learn it from me and learn it from Bernie Sanders, because if you want to win, that's the way to get it done. Giving up is for losers. Take a break if you need to, and then get back in there and fight for that better future. Having the odds against us is not the real problem, whether it seems the odds are against us or not. Having the odds seem to be against us is not the real problem either, regardless of whether the odds actually are against us or not. Giving up when it seems that the odds are against us is the real problem. We, the people, can and do change the odds. In fact, we make the odds. Until the election is completely over, and I don't mean just the primaries, although this applies to that process as well, people telling you what the odds are of your favored candidate winning, at best, are giving you outdated information, and at worst, are giving you inaccurate or blatantly false information. Regardless, whether you are more of a progressive or more of a regressive, the question to ask yourself before giving up is which way giving up or refusing to give up will most likely change the odds with regard to the actual best possible outcome. It is extremely unlikely that giving up will change the odds in your favor, and almost certain that giving up will increase the odds against you. However, another important question is whether what you think you want is really what's in your best interest. For example, if you think the best candidate can't win, but in reality the odds are better than you think, you would be mistaken to think that voting for the lesser of two evils is your best option, and you would also be mistaken to think that there are no good options. Voting for your favored candidate is still the best option. Even if your state does not allow write-in votes, you may be able to fight that or find a way. And if you start now, your chances of winning such a fight or finding such a way improve significantly, because you still have time to find other people who have also decided to fight against what they see as wrong rather than just give in to it. In 2016, we made Bernie Sanders a valid general election presidential write-in candidate in many states where he would not have been otherwise. We, the people, managed to get laws changed and provisions made, and to take advantage of little-known laws that were already in place. Preventing you from voting for the candidate of your choice and having that vote counted is voter disenfranchisement, and you have the right to fight against it. And you are very, very likely not the only person who is willing to put up such a fight. Some may already be trying to figure out how. Join them, or be the first and let them join you. Together, or perhaps even alone, you can make a difference. And odds are, you're far from alone. If you vote for the lesser of two evils, are you really promoting the best possible outcome, or merely the one you've been tricked into supporting by being offered a false dichotomy? Assuming our votes are counted as they're cast, not voting at all will result in a 100% error in the counting of your vote, because it does not get counted at all since it was not cast. Worse yet, casting a vote in support of a candidate that you are actually against is therefore an action which can result in a 200% error. Since in addition to the complete lack of your true support being counted, this is also as much effectively a vote against the candidate you truly support as it is effectively a vote against the candidate you consider to be the greater of two evils, who some other voter with the same favored candidate as you and the same assumption that this favored candidate can't win might just make the exact same 200% error that you made, but may see your perceived greater evil as the lesser of two evils and cast a supportive vote in favor of that candidate as an intended vote against the candidate that you voted for, with their vote working against your lesser of two evils vote just as yours works against theirs, but also working just as much against the candidate that you both truly support, so that together all the two of you manage to collectively achieve is to reduce the odds of electing the candidate that you both truly supported but thought could not win. What if a couple of 100 million people ready to make such a mistake collectively decided instead to cast their votes for the candidate that they actually wanted to see win, rather than casting a vote for either of the two candidates they're told they have to settle for choosing between? Until we have the right and the option to vote directly against a candidate, or whenever we have a candidate that we strongly support, this is what we should be doing. Right now, many millions of us have such a candidate in Bernie Sanders, and will not vote for a mere lesser of two evils, and should not give up either. With all of that said, here's the question I wish to ask, which I hope at least some viewers will answer and discuss in the comments section associated with this video. Do you consider yourself to be a progressive? That is to say, do you prefer progress over regress or stagnation? In other words, given the choice, would you rather humanity continues to work on making things better for our future? Or would you rather the current situation be conserved and things stay exactly as they are? Or would you rather society regress to something more akin to the way things were before humanity made any significant progress or in innovations in such things as agriculture, transportation, education, communication, and so on? Of course, if you really wanted to give up such things, you could simply move out into the woods, away from modern society, and live in the jungle or the rainforest or some other such less advanced habitat, and perhaps make use of some of the more primitive advances to build yourself a hut or a shanty or a small house. If you didn't want to be alone, you might even be able to convince some other regressives to come with you. Of course, rich people who push regressivism on our society obviously don't want such a life, or they would not be using their money to push such a life, because they would have given up their money, as it would be useless without the advances in human civilization that have allowed their money to have any value. So perhaps a slogan like "Make America Great Again" is only meant to convince people who want positive change that they can get it without progress. But obviously, combining anything good about the past with anything good about the present would be progress and not regress. So I think the offer is deceptive, because if we just went back to the way things were, it would not be good, let alone great. The billions of humans alive now would not survive together without the advances that have made survival in such large numbers possible, let alone could they ever thrive together if we were to roll back the clock on progress to the way things were decades or centuries ago. Even small regressive changes can prove quite damaging to modern society. Perhaps there may be some exceptions, but it would be the progressives who figure out which ones, because anyone can learn from the past, but it is the progressives who look to the future for solutions and not to the past or the present, where such solutions are lacking. In the midst of the current pandemic, the United States of America has found itself the victim of more than one setback, which most of us didn't even know about. As an example, in 2018, the President of the United States of America terminated the U.S. Pandemic Response Team to save money. And that decision is now costing us both money and lives. Such regressive setbacks hurt everyone in the long run, even if they might benefit a few people in the short term. This is similar to the way the greediness of cancer cells can benefit the cancer tumor itself in the short term, but tends to result in the termination of the body that sustains the cancer, which in turn terminates the cancer. This is something the greedy plutocracy and the greedy oligarchs they control still seem not to have figured out. Their regressive, selfish tendencies will eventually result in the end of humanity if the healthy parts of society don't step in and stop them. So here's the question I would like to ask. When it comes to politics, are you a progressive or a regressive? That is, are you more supportive of progressive politics or regressive politics? I know the usual dichotomy we're given is that the choices are either conservative versus progressive or conservative versus liberal, but the word conservative has a different meaning in each of those cases. In the first case, conservative and progressive have to do with keeping things as they are or supporting change rather than stagnation. In general, people who are already at an advantage over other people are the only ones who tend to prefer stagnation, because they fear losing their advantage if things change. However, what such people fail to realize is how much advantage they have over people of the past, and how it is progress that has given them such advantage in the first place. Of course, it is possible that as things progress, they could lose their advantage over other people, but it is also possible that they could gain an advantage over their current situation in the process. And it is also possible that they could lose some advantage even with regard to their current situation, but find themselves in a better world that the advantage they had maintained in the past was helping to hold back. In the second case, Conservative and liberal generally have to do with how much something is used or allowed, and can be applied to various aspects of politics and things that are not political in ways that can make either one of them look good to any person. Beware of people using such deceptive applications to fool you into thinking that what gives them the advantage over you, or helps to maintain the advantage they already have over you, is somehow giving you the advantage, or promising you the advantage in some hypothetical situation that you're unlikely to ever actually find yourself in. Also, beware of people conflating those two meanings of conservative. You might notice that in regard to the case of conservative versus liberal, I only spoke of what they generally have to do with. The reason I made such a qualification is because the conflation of the two meanings I mentioned of the term conservative sometimes results in the term liberal being used as an antonym of the first meaning I gave for conservative. That is, the term liberal is sometimes used to describe an openness to breaking from tradition. And allowing progress. In other words, liberal sometimes gets conflated with progressive. So to get around such conflation, let's speak of such positions in less ambiguous ways. There's an old joke that goes something to the effect of asking how long a man's legs need to be, with the intended response being that they need to be long enough to reach the ground. Well, of course, such a riddle is meant for humor more than for insight. I would like to propose the following rendition, more for insight than for humor. Question: how long should a person's arms and legs be? Answer: long enough to serve the person well. That is to say, arms or legs that are long enough or short enough to be disadvantageous tend not to serve the person well, and could be in that sense considered to be the wrong length for that person. For example, arms that are so long that they can easily drag on the ground might be a disadvantage to one person who is constantly having to hold them up in an awkward position in order to walk, but perhaps an advantage to a person who allows them to double as feet because their legs are too short to walk with in the first place, or who finds a way to use them to augment their running speed. Likewise, shorter legs might be nice for avoiding having to duck when entering a doorway, and longer legs might be nice for seeing over a crowd. But while some people might have good reason to wish their legs were longer, and other people might have good reason to wish their legs were shorter, making everyone's legs longer wouldn't be good for everyone, and making everyone's legs shorter wouldn't be good for everyone. However, if the technology became available to easily increase or decrease the length of a person's legs or arms, some people might be able to use such technology to give them an advantage that would help them to be more productive, which in turn could benefit everyone. Whereas concealing the existence of such technology, or preventing people who could benefit from such technology being allowed to benefit from it, could at best only benefit those people who are already at an advantage and would rather society at large miss out on such benefits so that they can maintain their advantage over others. Likewise, those at the top who push the idea of being conservative because they are opposed to change often obscure the issue of the fact that there is more than one kind of change, and simply make it all out to look like a bad thing because they're afraid of losing their advantage over everyone else. As an alternative to calling such a position conservative, one might clearly label it as merely opposed to change. Other terms that might apply to such disdain for change, depending on the specific meaning intended, would include orthodoxist, fundamentalist, traditionalist, conventionalist, unadventurous, unadventurous, or old-fashioned. In contrast, when someone talks about changing things back to the way they used to be, that is not merely conservative, but rather outright regressive. Regressive is the true opposite of progressive. Conservative, in the sense of being opposed to progress, is not an opposite of progressive, because the same person can also be opposed to regress. Again, it is a good idea to avoid conflating such distinct meanings. In fact, I would recommend that people should generally try to avoid the use of the words liberal and conservative as much as possible in politics, and instead opt for a synonym that matches the meaning they're trying to convey. Of course, nobody in their right mind is completely opposed to change of any kind, because without change of any kind, life could not exist. To have the stability of life continuing to exist, we also must have the instability of change. For example, the chemistry that allows our biological bodies to make use of such things as oxygen and nutrients does so by changing which atoms in our body are combined with which other atoms to form which molecules. So everyone is at least to some extent progressive or regressive, and of course some people might be progressive in some areas and regressive in other areas. But I think it's a fair question to ask whether you consider yourself to be more progressive or more regressive. If you consider yourself to be more progressive than regressive, shouldn't you be supporting the most progressive candidates that you can find? Or if not the most progressive, perhaps the least regressive. Could a progressive person really even consider the least regressive candidate to be worth positive support if that candidate is still more regressive than progressive? In 2016, many people used the hashtag Bernie or Bust to basically mean that they were going to vote progressive no matter what. While a progressive no matter what hashtag might be more descriptive, it is long and cumbersome, and I wouldn't expect it to gain the same popularity. So maybe if you're progressive, consider giving it a try and see if you might be able to prove me wrong about it never gaining such popularity. I wouldn't mind being proven wrong about such a thing. Meanwhile, I certainly would not discourage continuing to use Bernie or Bust. And as for me, I will be writing in Bernie Sanders in the 2020 general election if he's not on the ballot. And I'm already fighting to make sure that he will be a valid option in as many states as possible if the DNC doesn't give him their nomination, which they still owe us from 2016 when they stole it from Bernie Sanders and from the people by breaking their own bylaws and throwing out enough of his delegates after the first round of delegate votes to ensure that he could not win the second round as well. Thank you for your consideration. I hope we all have a better future coming.